The haunting beginning, a body reduced to just 16 kilograms. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, an inexplicable wave of dread washed over the city when authorities discovered a body that would soon become the center of one of California's most disturbing mysteries. The remains weighed only 16 kilograms, a figure so shockingly low that it left experienced medical examiners in disbelief. There was no trace of any internal organs, no heart, no lungs, no liver, just an empty shell, hauntingly light, with every cavity hollowed out as if methodically stripped of its essence. The physical state of the corpse challenged every logical assumption. Usually, even a severely decomposed body of someone in the late teens would weigh several times more. The skin, though damaged, displayed patterns unlike what would be expected from natural decomposition or predation. There were no telltale signs of animal scavenging, nor were there markings consistent with accidental trauma. In fact, forensics noted a surgical-like precision in the absence of tissues, almost clinical, yet grotesque in its implication. The discovery site added further layers to the horror. The body was found nestled beneath an imposing bluffs frequented by both tourists and locals, a place more often associated with laughter and ocean spray than scenes of unthinkable violence. Yet there, amidst the drifting sand and salt-kissed wind, officers stood over a scene so stark, so abnormal, that even the most seasoned detectives paused. When news of the incident broke, whispers of organ trafficking and cult rituals spread like wildfire. The public's imagination ran rampant. Media outlets dove into theories as communities questioned if a new threat was lurking in their beloved city. The sheer physical abnormality of the remains, its tragic lightness, the stark absence of the very organs that defined its humanity, instantly set this case apart. Inside the investigation room, the number 16 kilograms loomed large. It wasn't just a statistic, it represented the complete erasure of a young person's vitality. Law enforcement, baffled and angered in equal measure, found themselves haunted by the question, what kind of force, human or otherwise, could leave behind not just a body, but a cruel metaphor for disappearance and loss? That very weight became a symbol. A jarring, relentless reminder that not all mysteries fade, some linger, some scar, and some shake the very core of a city that once believed it had seen everything. U.S. Coastal Tourism City. In the golden embrace of the California coastline lies Santa Monica, a city that glistens under the sun as one of America's most iconic seaside gems. From sunrise to sunset, this vibrant destination pulses with the energy of surfboards slicing through cerulean waves, the laughter of travelers strolling along the world-famous pier, and the hypnotic rhythm of street performers captivating passing crowds on 3rd Street Promenade. It's a place where dreams come alive beneath palm-lined boulevards, and the ocean's salty breath mingles with the scent of gourmet food trucks and artisanal coffee wafting through the breeze. Santa Monica embodies the quintessence of Californian leisure. Colorful festivals light up the boardwalk throughout the year, drawing both locals and international tourists into a swirl of music, food, and cultural celebration. The Ferris wheel sparkles above Pacific Park, casting bright reflections on the rolling tide below. By day, beach volleyball courts fill with shouts and cheers. By night, luxury hotels, indie boutiques, and rooftop bars buzz under the glowing city lights. Yet behind the sparkling postcard image, an undercurrent of reality persists, a complex tapestry woven with both charm and challenge. While Santa Monica showcases affluence and aspiration with its art galleries, yoga studios, and open-air farmers markets, certain pockets are shadowed by the struggles of urban America. The city faces the persistent presence of homelessness, petty crime, and in rare yet chilling cases, darker phenomena that unsettled the steadfast feeling of security. Santa Monica is also layered in history. Once inhabited by the Tongva people, it later welcomed Spanish settlers, evolving through the boom of the Golden Railway Age and the subsequent rise of West Coast pop culture. Today it courts Hollywood's elite, tech innovators, and free-spirited wanderers from around the world. Its beaches have witnessed decades of stories, joyful reunions, sunburned adventures, and on rare occasion, deeply troubling mysteries that gripped the imagination of the entire nation. It is within this paradoxical paradise, surrounded by cinematic sunsets and golden sands, that a darkness would emerge, jarring, unthinkable, and poised to shake even the most carefree soul awake. The enigma of tragic deaths. Across the sun-touched streets and vibrant neighborhoods of this American coastal city, A chilling question lingers in the salty air. Why have so many painful, unresolved deaths haunted its history? While the city is renowned for its sparkling beachfronts, pulsing nightlife, and the joyful spirit of tourists from around the world, there exists a parallel narrative, one marked by shadows, mysteries, and a type of heartache that never quite fades. Local residents and longtime business owners can recall a litany of disturbing incidents spanning decades: young wanderers lost without a trace, talented artists found under inexplicable circumstances, bodies surfacing along the jetty with stories cut tragically short. These aren't the fables told to scare children, they're the haunting memories drifting through community gatherings and whispered among friends at sunset. A thread of caution quietly wound through even the most jubilant celebrations. It isn't just the number of cases but their eerie similarities that terrify people most. In many instances, the deceased are visitors, drawn here by the city's magnetic promise of freedom and new beginnings, only for their adventures to end abruptly. There's almost a pattern of promising youth disappearing or meeting untimely, unexplained deaths, their stories swelling the local folklore with a sorrow that feels both personal and universal. For years, speculation has persisted. Is there something hidden beneath the postcard beauty of this city? A hidden danger? A network of criminality? Some cursed legacy? Theories range wildly, from sinister cult activity and organized crime to more rational fears of trafficking or urban neglect. Law enforcement sometimes appears as perplexed as the grieving families, producing official statements that sound as hollow as the click of a lifeguard's whistle at midnight. Public trust wavers with each new report, fueling the undercurrent of dread that shapes daily conversations and colors the city's image after dark. Media coverage fans the flames, sometimes seizing on salacious details to drive fear even deeper. National headlines shout about mystery and malice, while local papers print sorrowful interviews with loved ones searching for closure. Each new tragedy reopens old wounds, compounding uncertainty and leaving families to wrestle with questions that the city, for all its light and promise, refuses to clearly answer. Of all the unsolved cases, some stand apart in the collective memory. The city's history is marked not just by the number of these incidents but by their shocking nature, the unfathomable loss suffered by families, and the growing suspicion that beneath the city's festive veneer, something mournful and unresolved waits in the shadows. Here beauty and tragedy dance strangely close, and the truth behind these deaths remains one of the coast's most enduring enigmas. The grisly discovery of summer, 2016. The sun blazed high over the Californian coastline in July 2016, painting the Pacific in perfect turquoise as tourists and locals alike flocked to the breathing heart of Santa Monica. The city pulsed with the usual exuberance of summer: open-air concerts, food festivals, and the never-ending parade of surfers lugging boards over golden sand. Yet behind this picture-perfect backdrop, fate was quietly weaving a chilling narrative that would soon shatter the city's sense of safety and capture the attention of an entire nation. It started as an ordinary day for the park ranger patrolling the dramatic cliffs that rise just north of the city. The area was familiar, its winding paths regularly alive with visiting hikers and amateur photographers seeking a slice of rugged ocean view. But that July afternoon, a routine patrol was interrupted by a scent both foreign and unmistakable, sharp, acidic, and sinister in the salty air. Guided by professional instinct and uneasy curiosity, the ranger followed the trail through low brush until coming upon a sight that would forever be seared into memory. Lying in a shallow depression at the foot of the bluffs was what would later be identified as a young man's remains. The body, horrifyingly light and frail, manifested a grotesque parody of what a human form should be. Most jarring of all, forensic teams would soon confirm the body's astonishing weight, just 16 kilograms, so insubstantial that even the most seasoned pathologists expressed open shock. Missing were all major organs: heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, and chillingly, even the brain. It was as if the core of life had been plucked out, leaving only a battered shell. What further confounded authorities was the clinical precision with which the organs had been removed. There were no signs typical of wild animal predation, no ragged tears, no gnawing bite marks. Nor were there defensive wounds or evidence to suggest a panicked struggle. The precise incisions and the careful way bodily cavities had been cleaned out left longtime coroner staff exchanging troubled, silent glances. This was a scene cartoonishly removed from the grisly realities they'd learned to expect. Even Hollywood would hesitate to script something so coldly surgical. Victims' belongings were nowhere to be found. The spot was otherwise empty, haunted only by the flutter of police tape soon to cordon off the site and the low thrum of helicopters overhead. News of the discovery spread rapidly, first among officers, then on local radio, and soon across national headlines. In coffee shops and at kitchen tables, people asked the same chilling questions. Who could do such a thing? Was this the work of traffickers, a cult, or something even stranger lurking beneath the city's cheery seaside mask? The city's response was immediate and visceral. Waves of grief, fear, and anger collided as parents clung to their children and neighbors eyed each other warily. Social media became a battleground for rumor and speculation. Talk shows hosted self-declared experts dissecting every shadow. For months, the case was a storm cloud on Santa Monica's horizon, an unyielding mystery, a testament to the darkness that can strike even at the height of summer joy. U.S. coastal tourist city. The air inside Los Angeles International Airport shimmered with nervous anticipation that afternoon as Susan waited. She arrived hours ahead of schedule, the kind of mother who always feared unwanted surprises, suitcase in hand and eyes flicking from the arrivals board to her phone. The terminal was a vibrant parade, business people bustling by, families embracing, travelers sharing stories of faraway places. But Susan's thoughts were far from those symphonies of reunion. They were fixed on her son Michael, whose empty seat beside her echoed louder with each passing minute. She replayed their last conversation over and over in her head. Michael, ever the dreamer, had promised to text her as soon as he landed, joking that American customs might take forever. There was charm in his voice, a radiant confidence that always seemed to reassure her from halfway around the world. But behind every smile, Susan could still hear the faint tremor, a mother's sixth sense that something was off. The minutes crawled by, then hours. At first, Susan rationalized the delay. After all, international flights were notorious for late arrivals and misplaced baggage. Maybe Michael was simply waiting for his suitcase. Perhaps his cell died, or he couldn't find a Wi-Fi signal strong enough to send a message. She clutched onto these plausible explanations, convincing herself that worry was nothing but an overreaction. But a mother's heart is rarely wrong. She scanned the crowd pouring from customs, a blur of faces, a mosaic of emotions. She imagined what Michael would look like stepping into the terminal, tall, with untamed hair, and the kind of exuberance that turned even the most mundane destination into a new adventure. But as the endless procession of strangers filtered through, her hope began to crack. It started small, a missed call, an unanswered text, then grew into a rising panic as she realized she was the only one still waiting. Susan's hands shook as she dialed Michael's number. The phone rang out, each tone a needle in her chest. Voicemail. She tried again and again, her mind cycling rapidly through worst-case scenarios and fervent prayers. She called her ex-husband Ben, his voice subdued with concern, but edged with the same rising terror that now choked her own. Together they called friends in the U.S. No one had spoken to Michael recently, and no one had seen any activity on his social media. Insomnia became her new companion as she watched the clock lurch slowly toward morning. Susan had always been the backbone of the family, the calm eye in any storm. But that night, her calm was breached. The familiar rituals of hope, pouring tea, straightening her son's room, pulling out his favorite snacks for a homecoming, now felt like desperate acts of denial. She couldn't eat, she couldn't rest. Every time her phone buzzed, her chest constricted, until inevitably it proved to be yet another email, another spam call, another well-intentioned message that was not from Michael. By the second day, dread became routine. There were formalities to attend to, calls to the authorities, the tedious robotic process of recounting Michael's last known movements and handing over what little evidence she could gather. A report was filed with German authorities and immediately forwarded to counterparts in the U.S., but Susan sensed that bureaucracy moved far slower than maternal panic. She felt herself isolated in an ocean of unfamiliar faces and indifferent system prompts, forced to wait for answers she desperately needed but doubted would ever come. Her family rallied around her, trying to infuse the house with warmth and energy, but the shadow was impossible to dispel. Photos of Michael as a child, a toothless grin, muddy sneakers, a lopsided Halloween costume, only served to deepen the chasm of absence. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of her phone or the muffled sobs she allowed herself when no one else was around. Her younger son, Daniel, tried to comfort her, but his own grief was raw, his own fear evident in the way he avoided Michael's old room or retreated to his headphones when the silence became too heavy. The media soon caught wind of her son's disappearance, and Susan found herself fielding calls from reporters, her words carefully measured, not wanting to jeopardize the investigation but desperate for exposure that might stir up a lead. She scrolled endlessly through online forums where strangers speculated wildly on Michael's fate, swinging between anger at their insensitivity and a perverse gratitude that at least someone was paying attention. It was only when Ben arrived in California that Susan allowed herself to collapse. In his arms, her grief poured out in torrents she had entrusted to no one else. Together they paced the small living room, both searching for explanations or at least closure. Ben, always more analytical, drafted lists of Michael's possible routes and interests. They contacted hostels, rental agencies, and local businesses, each call ending in frustration and ever-widening uncertainty. Every so often a thread of hope would emerge, a rumor, a possible sighting, a hint that Michael had rebooked a flight or was seen at a coffee shop along the boardwalk. Each time Susan would rally, her energy renewed by the possibility of reunion. But each lead dissolved and despair set in deeper than before. Through it all, Susan clung to routine, a fragile armor against the tidal waves of emotion. She walked the neighborhood every morning as if searching for Michael among the joggers and dog walkers. She watched the sunset from the porch, talking softly to the sky, convinced that somewhere out there, her son could hear her. Evenings became a ritual of lighting candles, scrolling through old messages and reminding herself to breathe, to hope, to wait. When the news finally broke, delivered by strangers in plain clothes, there was no dramatic collapse, no shattering scream, just a stunned silence as though the world had finally run out of words. Susan's days became filled not with waiting, but with mourning. Her hope, which had sustained her through every hour of Michael's absence, now turned inward, fueling memories and goodbyes that came too soon. Calling in vain. Susan stared at her phone in growing disbelief, the device growing heavier in her clammy grasp with every agonizing second. She had already called Michael's number, first calmly, then urgently, her motherly intuition sharpening into a fine, cold blade of worry. Each ring intensified her sense of dread. No answer. No friendly, familiar voice, not even the simple chime of a reassuring text response. Only the unyielding void of voicemail, where she left messages that hovered between hope and desperation, her voice always trembling at the end, as if Michael might intuit the pain she was trying to conceal. She tried all the rational explanations. Perhaps Michael's phone battery died. Maybe he was in an underground subway, or caught up in the swirl of bustling crowds at the Santa Monica Pier. Airports were notorious for weak reception after all, but each new attempt to call only deepened Susan's unease. Mothers develop a sixth sense that tugs insistently at the mind when something is not right, a whisper woven from years of caretaking and love. Susan's thoughts raced, her heart thudded so loudly she imagined the whole waiting lounge at LAX could hear it. She paced the shiny linoleum floor, her phone pressed tight to her ear, listening to the hollow mechanical ring echoing across continents. She toggled through Michael's recent messages, reread their thread, recalling his excited last text. "Landing soon, can't wait to see you." That light-hearted digital footprint now felt like a life raft, something she clung to, replayed, and found herself whispering back to as the airport brightened and then dimmed into twilight around her. Susan began reaching out to Michael's friends one by one. She scrolled through his contact list, remembering names from old school events, birthday invitations, sporadic video calls, Max, Emma, Jaden. Each call began with a shaky, "Hi, it's Susan," and fell quickly into, "Have you heard from Michael?" None of them had. Some hadn't even realized he was in California, and their surprise only stoked her growing panic. She messaged them on social media, hoping for quick replies, desperate for any hint that someone, somewhere, had seen or spoken to him. Her fear escalated further when she called Michael's father, Ben. Their divorce was amicable but left them mutually awkward, yet necessity shattered the distance. In a low, quivering voice, Susan told Ben everything she knew, the missed arrival, the unanswered calls, the gnawing intuition that something was wrong. Ben, calm but visibly shaken, promised to help, immediately firing off a flurry of emails and calls from his Berlin apartment. They coordinated across different time zones, unified by the same growing alarm that they couldn't yet name out loud. Susan dialed the hostel in Santa Monica where Michael had last checked in. The clerk was pleasant but unhelpful. Michael had checked out early that morning, left in high spirits with a rental bike, and hadn't returned. The knowledge was a double blow. Not only was he unreachable, but he was actively missing, his last known location a city thousands of miles from home. Susan felt as though the world was tilting. each unanswered call building a wall of dread around her. She cycled through Michael's social media accounts, searching for signs of life. An Instagram post, a check-in, a casual message to a friend. But his profiles were eerily silent. No new uploads, no status updates, no sign he had been online at all. Susan posted polite yet urgent appeals in the comments. "Has anyone seen Michael? Please let us know." Under every photo she lingered, replaying his smile, his laugh, willing him to appear somewhere in the feed. To break the silence herself found suffocating. The hours dragged into the longest night of her life. Friends and distant relatives called to offer suggestions or vague reassurances. He's probably exploring, or maybe he's just lost track of time. But Susan knew the shape of worry too intimately to be comforted by platitudes. She refreshed her inbox obsessively, hoping for a message. Her phone was never out of reach. Even when making tea, folding laundry, or pacing the house, she listened for the soft ping of an incoming call. Every unknown number made her chest seize with frantic hope, only for her to deflate at another telemarketer or wrong number. By sunrise, Susan's attempts had evolved from hopeful to mechanical. She opened her laptop and recorded every call, every response in a precise log, hour, number dialed, outcome, hoping that meticulousness might give her some semblance of control. She tried video calls, thinking maybe seeing her face would compel Michael to answer. She even messaged old acquaintances who might be in California, asking for their help spreading the word. Each unanswered outreach was a fresh blow, fraying the edges of her resolve. Susan's world narrowed. Whole hours disappeared as she watched her phone, praying for any signal, an accidental pocket dial, a fragment of a voicemail, even a misdirected call. In the sleepless, disorienting hours that followed, every ring set her nerves alight. Her inner monologue oscillated wildly between hope and dread. What if Michael had been mugged? What if he was lost and scared, trying to reach her from a stranger's phone? What if he was simply off somewhere, blissfully unaware of the chaos his silence had unleashed? Guilt started to gnaw at her, irrational but unavoidable. Had she worried too much, stifled him with check-ins before his trip? Had she not worried enough, failing to warn him of dangers in a place she herself had never visited? She clung fiercely to their last words, replaying the conversation for hidden clues, a hesitation in his voice, a pause, anything. Yet there was nothing but the gnawing emptiness that his absence left behind. As the second day without contact dawned, Susan's anxiety hardened into resolve. Her vision blurred from lack of sleep, but her determination grew sharper. Calling the German consulate, she tried to keep her voice calm, explaining the sequence of events, asking if they might intervene. She submitted reports on international missing persons websites, uploaded Michael's latest photos, and composed emails to both the U.S. and German authorities. Each new avenue brought a deluge of paperwork and standard procedures, but Susan was relentless. She would not let bureaucracy bury her son's disappearance in red tape. She called local hospitals, thinking, hoping even, that Michael might have been injured and unable to reach her himself. She repeated her son's name, gave descriptions of his hair, tattoos, the clothes he likely wore, his personality quirks. No one had seen him. Susan found herself whispering prayers, not just for Michael's safety, but for the simple mercy of an answer. With each passing hour, every failed call and every silent response, the vastness of the distance between them, the Atlantic Ocean, an entire continent, felt insurmountable, and yet she dialed and dialed again, unwilling and unable to surrender to the silence. Alert the police and begin an investigation. On the morning of July 23, 2016, Michael's family found themselves facing a reality they had long dreaded, but never truly believed would come to pass. Their son was officially missing on American soil. The household, once bustling with hopeful preparations and impatient waiting, had transformed overnight into one overshadowed by anxiety, a constant tension humming beneath every word. After exhausting all informal means of contact, calls to friends, messages to social media contacts, desperate checks of hospitals and hostels, Susan and Ben faced the inescapable next step. They had to report Michael's disappearance to the authorities. In their home in Berlin, Susan's hands trembled as she dialed the number for the German police. Her statement felt surreal, as if she was reading someone else's tragedy from a script. A son traveling alone, last seen in California, all contact lost. The officer, calm but methodical, took down every piece of information, flight numbers, physical description, last known locations, even oddities in behavior Michael might have exhibited. Ben monitored Michael's bank accounts and communications, aware that any activity, no matter how minor, could hint at his son's whereabouts. The parents understood that with every hour passing, chances for a swift and safe recovery diminished. The German authorities acted swiftly, entering Michael's case into international missing person databases and reaching out to the appropriate agencies in the United States. For the Mansons, this was where their control ended. They were forced to entrust their son's fate to systems and strangers across an ocean. Meanwhile, on the West Coast, the incoming alert flitted across the screens at the Santa Monica Police Department in the early hours of dawn. Detectives assigned to missing person cases quickly began reviewing Michael's travel records and identifying his most recent activity. Working in coordination with German officials and the United States Department of State, Santa Monica PD compiled a timeline drawn from every scrap of available evidence: surveillance footage from Los Angeles International Airport, hostile check-in logs, time-stamped traffic camera feeds on the Pacific Coast Highway. When Michael's name appeared on the hostile roster but records showed no further check-ins or digital footprints afterward, alarm bells began to ring. In the weeks prior, Santa Monica had witnessed a troubling rise in vanished tourists, cases that made officers especially sensitive to patterns that might otherwise be dismissed as youthful carelessness or poor planning. Investigators moved quickly. They canvassed areas frequented by backpackers and solo travelers, re-interviewing hostile staff, food vendors and lifeguards along the crowded boardwalks. The investigation soon took on a life of its own, involving not just the local police but also the FBI, Interpol, and multiple consular officials. Each organization brought its own priorities and protocols, at times complicating communication, but the shared urgency was indisputable. Flyers went up almost overnight, Michael's smiling face now an indelible emblem of uncertainty. Officers fielded dozens of tips. A young man fitting Michael's description spotted at a beachfront coffeehouse, a possible sighting at a bus terminal, someone who claimed to have lent their phone to a confused tourist. Each lead was pursued with painstaking dedication, but none yielded more than shadows and rumors. One particularly daunting task for the investigators was reconstructing Michael's last known movements. Using digital breadcrumbs, they had access to the hostel's Wi-Fi logs, his hesitant bike rental transaction, and occasional pings from his phone before it fell silent. This kind of work, scrutinizing each fleeting online trace and trying to differentiate the meaningful from the mundane, was as frustrating as it was critical. The more they pieced together, the more they realized that Michael's journey on July 18th was both intentionally adventurous and strangely solitary. He had left the hostel early with a GoPro strapped to his rented bicycle, intent on exploring a rumored network of hidden tunnels beneath Santa Monica, a local curiosity known to attract urban explorers and thrill-seekers. The police expanded their search to areas well beyond conventional tourist routes. Officers and volunteers methodically scoured the rugged coastline, peered into underpasses, abandoned properties, and the notorious graffiti-painted entrances to those urban tunnels Michael had intended to find. They distributed search and rescue teams along the bluffs, where steep cliffs met the restless Pacific, and conducted drone sweeps for any sign of movement or evidence. Authorities reached out to local hospitals and clinics in case an unidentified patient fit Michael's description. The fear, unspoken but ever present, was that the worst had already happened. Back at headquarters, the command center grew into a hive of frenetic energy. Dozens of maps littered the tables, each marked with pins for possible sightings, known risk areas, and locations where bodies had been found in previous years. Collaborative meetings grew tense as law enforcement juggled the flood of new tips with older, tragically unresolved disappearances along the West Coast. The Mansons received daily updates, some concrete, most distressingly vague. Language barriers, time zone differences, and bureaucratic red tape added layers of emotional exhaustion as Susan and Ben clung to their phones at all hours, parsing every email and official call for hope. The media, ever hungry for a sensational headline, soon entered the fray. National news coverage forced the investigation further into the spotlight, sometimes to the frustration of police who worried about rumors disrupting their work. Yet the public exposure also meant more tips and witnesses stepping forward, every one of which had to be carefully vetted to distinguish fact from fiction. The pressure to solve Michael's case quickly intensified, as did the scrutiny on law enforcement's every move. Days stretched into weeks, the search ballooning in scope yet always circling back to the same cold trail. As public anxiety escalated, the police instituted more coordinated search efforts, organizing volunteer grid searches through both populated parks and remote, rarely visited stretches of beach. Specialized teams combed the jagged cliffs with ropes and search dogs while divers checked coves and storm drains for any sign of Michael or a clue to his fate. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit reviewed case files and mapped similarities between Michael's disappearance and other unsolved cases across California's coastal cities. Though protocols prevented the sharing of key details early on, investigators remained in close contact with the Mansons. They explained what could be disclosed, offering assurances of their commitment even as progress moved at a glacial pace. Behind the scenes, forensic teams prepared for any eventuality, collecting foreign fibers, interpreting possible blood evidence, and running DNA comparison tests for unidentified remains. Each step was methodical, clinical, and weighed down by the emotional reality of a family living in limbo thousands of miles away. When the anonymous tip arrived on July 26th, reporting the grim discovery at the base of the Santa Monica Bluffs, the investigation pivoted sharply. The next phase, crime scene management and evidence recovery, would bring both new hope for answers and a fresh wave of dread. Unraveling a mysterious journey. Reconstructing Mike Manson's adventure meant sifting through digital traces, family recollections, half-finished travel logs, and the faded imprints of dreams never realized. To his family, friends, and investigators, each detail of his trip was precious, a step toward understanding not only his fate, but the enigmatic path that led him there. What might have driven a bright, energetic young man from Berlin into the strange labyrinth beneath a sunlit American paradise? Mike was born to travel. From a young age, his parents filled his world with stories of distant lands and epic road trips across Europe. By the time he graduated college, Mike already carried the map of the world etched into his heart. For years he saved from a part-time job, recording goals in journals and marking each accomplished milestone with snapshots, ticket stubs, and handwritten notes. His first big solo journey was a rite of passage, a summer exploring California, land of surf, cinema, and perpetual summer. His planning was methodical, but alive with improvisation. Weeks before departure, Mike sent his mother playlists of classic West Coast music. He researched hidden beaches, local legends, and underground hangouts, often sending friends links to offbeat blogs or Reddit threads about urban explorers in Los Angeles. "I want to find something nobody else sees," he messaged, equal parts bravado and boyish wonder. Upon arrival, Mike initially stuck to the usual script of a budget backpacker: hostels, walking tours, happy hours, and lazy afternoons on the sand with other international travelers. He reconnected with his girlfriend for coastal detours, quirky roadside diners, impromptu hikes, late-night bonfires. After she returned home, Mike decided to stay longer in Santa Monica, determined to chase the mythic freedom that California promised. He wandered the boardwalk alone, keeping a video diary on his GoPro, soaking in the pastel glow of dusk and scribbling notes about places he planned to visit. Yet the major deviation from his itinerary appeared in his last messages. Increasingly, his attention latched onto tales of the city's hidden underbelly, the secret tunnels beneath Santa Monica, rumored since at least the 1920s. Threads on urban explorer forums teased with half-finished maps and blurry photographs, storm drains that snaked beneath city blocks, graffiti-tagged passageways rumored to host everything from illicit raves to fleeting homeless encampments. Some users posted cautionary warnings about the unstable ground, sudden flooding, or the risk of violent encounters. Others wrote breathlessly of subterranean discoveries, murals, old relics, locked doors, and the flutter of bats when a forgotten hatch creaked open. Mike's curiosity became obsession. His last hostel check-in log showed a pattern: checking out for night walks, returning at odd hours, borrowing guidebooks on local urban legends. He even purchased a basic map from a nearby gas station and annotated it himself, using online sources to mark suspected tunnel entrances. The day before his disappearance, staff recalled him chatting with another guest about the tunnels that the city wants to forget. On July 18th, Mike set out just after dawn, renting a bike with an attached GoPro. His social media post that morning, a simple selfie captioned, "Going off the grid, wish me luck," ended up being one of his last public messages. Bike rental records showed he left the general tourist area, riding north along the bluffs, pausing several times according to traffic cams, sometimes resting his bike by secluded viewpoints. The GPS trail cut off near a spot rumored by locals to conceal a rusted maintenance hatch, an often graffitied entrance spoken about in whispers among surf kids and night joggers. Investigators pored over every known detail: Mike's route on security cams, interviews with hostel guests, snippets from calls and texts. In his hostel locker, police found a scrawled list of urban legends, ghost stories, whispers of vanished travelers, even references to a supposed secret society that guarded the tunnel's deeper reaches. While most dismissed these as flights of fancy, others pointed out how thoroughly Mike had researched each lead. For friends and family, the process of retracing Mike's journey was tormenting and bittersweet. They shared memories, piecing together what made Mike tick: his fascination with boundaries, his love of maps, his need to push just past where others stopped. His father replayed old family videos in which a much younger Mike would insist on finding the secret door at every museum, every park, always convinced there was more to any story if one knew where to look. Despite the mounting evidence, each new clue seemed to lead only to further questions. No one who reportedly saw Mike out on the bluffs had noted anything unusual, no argument, no sense that he was being followed. The GoPro in his backpack were never recovered. Even the weather that day remained ordinary, remembered by locals as perfect for getting lost. Expert consulting investigators speculated, why would Mike plunge into such an uncertain venture alone? Some argued that wanderlust, mixed with the intoxicating sense of independence and invulnerability that sometimes clings to travelers, drove him farther into danger. Others believed the mystery of the tunnels, the way they seemed both timeless and forbidden, acted like a siren song, irresistible to a soul itching for discovery. Local authorities did their best to reconstruct the missing hours. They mapped out Mike's last known locations, revisited storefronts for security camera footage, and walked the possible routes he could have taken on that crucial day. The tunnel entrances, obscured by graffiti and bramble, were painstakingly searched, their darkness yielding little more than echoes, lost wrappers, and the distant drip of water. A scent-tracking dog hit on a trail briefly by one such opening, only to lose it deeper underground, where human senses and technology alike faltered. Meanwhile, the urban explorer community who'd corresponded with Mike online felt the blow personally. Forum threads filled with worry and speculation. Had he ventured into a collapse-prone corridor? Had someone seen him trespassing and reacted with violence? Was it possible he'd simply gotten lost, his phone dying, cut off from both rescue and return? Some claimed to spot a lone cyclist matching Mike's description riding toward the cliffs the morning he was last seen, but those accounts faded into the haze of rumor, each a fragile thread in the web of hope and heartbreak. News articles soon described a young man captivated by mystery, persistent in his search for something beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. As the days slipped by, the case became both a private anguish and a kind of urban myth of its own. Mike's family clung to the story as a lifeline. If he had plunged into the city's depths chasing a forgotten legend, could he somehow reappear just as unexpectedly? Even those who never met him felt the echo of his vanished journey, a symbol of how quickly adventure can give way to uncertainty, and how every hidden corner, however alluring, carries its own risks. For all the digital breadcrumbs and determined searching, Mike's exact route and last moments would remain stubbornly shrouded. Yet in the process of reliving his trip, through data, testimony, and memories, the loved ones and investigators carried forward a bittersweet truth. The drive to explore, to test boundaries, and to seek stories is a double-edged gift. Mike's path, winding through sunshine and shadow, remains a haunting testament to longing, curiosity, and the unknowable places to which those qualities sometimes lead. The passion for exploration leads to tragedy. From a very young age, Mike's curiosity wasn't just typical wanderlust, it was an irrepressible drive to see the world not just as it was, but as it might be, hidden in plain sight. He didn't just want to visit places, he wanted to uncover secrets, find stories that no one else could. This passion grew hand in hand with his academic interests and his personality, shaping the kind of traveler and person he would become. Instead of collecting souvenirs, Mike collected moments of awe and used his camera, journal, and vivid memory as repositories for every little adventure. As Mike grew older, his love of exploration evolved from family road trips and backyard expeditions in Berlin to solo travels that stretched his own boundaries. Science documentaries, urban legends from internet forums, and late-night talks with fellow backpackers fueled a growing hunger for real discoveries. He became the sort who, given a choice between the main road and a shadowy overgrown path, would always choose the path less traveled. He inspired others too. Friends often said being around Mike made them look for wonder in unexpected corners, whether exploring abandoned rail yards, old bridges, or even their local city park at midnight. His freedom in America, especially in a vibrant melting pot like Santa Monica, seemed to heighten that instinct even more. With every sun-drenched day on the promenade, every conversation in emerging English or rough German-accented slang, Mike felt as though entire networks of hidden architecture, history, and unfinished stories were waiting for him just beneath the surface. On message boards, he exchanged tips with fellow explorers: where to find a forgotten mural, the best time at night to slip into a half-buried tunnel for a glimpse at its underground graffiti, which buildings on the coast had rumors of sealed-off basements or secret rooms. But his passion was more than idle curiosity or bravado. For Mike, exploration was deeply tied to identity and meaning. The city's clandestine labyrinth of tunnels and rumored underground passageways preoccupied his thoughts for weeks. It wasn't just the thrill, it was the pressing urge to document what had been hidden, surfacing truths that most others would rather ignore. To him, these places held more than dust and shadows. They represented forgotten history, lost dreams, and perhaps a kind of redemption for the city itself. Family and friends sometimes worried. There were plenty of warnings on internet forums: dangerous encounters with vagrants, sudden flooding, the risk of structural collapse. Still, Mike's excitement rarely dimmed. He believed that the world's darker or undiscovered places shouldn't be left to rumor, but explored responsibly and honestly. In his last weeks, his messages home alternated between cheerful quips about strange local foods and thoughtful reflections on what he might find if he finally uncovered the legendary Santa Monica tunnels. The decision to pursue the tunnels came after days of mapping, note-taking, and late-night walks along the bluffs. Some saw this as reckless. To Mike, it seemed like the natural next step for someone so enthralled by the city's dual nature, the sunlit surface and the shadowy depths. He wasn't pursuing danger for its own sake, but the chance to document, to understand, and maybe even to connect with the invisible layers of humanity that the rest of the world pretended not to notice. In the context of his disappearance, those same traits, his insatiable curiosity, fearlessness, and singular focus, transformed from admirable qualities into haunting vulnerabilities. Police and those close to him wondered whether he'd gone too deep, either literally into the tunnels or figuratively into a world he couldn't find his way out of. The searchers who retraced his route, crawling through claustrophobic spaces or peering down storm drains, spoke of Mike not just as a victim but also as someone with the soul of a true explorer. His legacy, for all its tragic end, left a ripple among the network of urban adventurers who knew of his journey, an admonition about the razor-thin line between discovery and loss. The aftermath of his story continued to shape those around him. Mike's friends would recall the times he'd encouraged them to veer off the beaten path, to seek out the beauty and truth beneath everyday facades. His family, as they grieved, also carried pride. Their son's longing for meaning had turned the anonymous underbelly of a foreign city into a story cherished and mourned by strangers. Even online, fellow explorers posted tributes, sharing tales of their own narrow escapes, always adding a note. Mike wasn't reckless. He was drawn onward by the conviction that every hidden place deserved to be seen, and that each journey changes a little bit of both the seeker and the world sought. The final adventure. Mike's final adventure began before dawn broke on that ill-fated July day, long before anyone realized how significant each seemingly innocent decision would become. From the moment the wheels of his rental bike touched the morning dew, and he strapped the GoPro securely onto his backpack, he was a man driven simultaneously by intent and by the unknown, a traveler at the crossroads between excitement and danger, chasing an elusive story far beneath the surface of Santa Monica's sun-kissed streets. He had mapped out a route the night before, sprawled on his cramped hostel bed, thumbing through online forums and sketching new lines onto his dog-eared pocket map. His destination was clear in his mind: find the rumored maintenance hatch on the northern bluffs, the whispered entrance that so many local legends had described yet none had confirmed with certainty. The promise of subterranean pathways and forgotten spaces tugged at his curiosity, overriding warnings from online acquaintances who cautioned about unstable ground, city patrols, and the occasional unnerving story of prior explorers who simply hadn't come back. His phone's location services were intentionally left off. Mike prided himself on going off the grid. He texted his mother once more, a breezy, self-assured message: "Going dark for a bit, talk soon," before switching it into airplane mode as if preempting any call for caution or alarm. That act, so small and insignificant in the flow of a young adventurer's morning, would later haunt everyone who tried to piece together his final hours. In the bustling common room he exchanged travel banter with a pair of European backpackers. They would later remember the sparkle in his eyes, the confidence with which he ducked out the door, promising to share photos of whatever he found beneath the city. His first stops were familiar vantages, the overlook where the city melted into the water, the mural-choked walls near the Santa Monica Pier, documenting snippets of his passage with short video clips and whispered commentary. But with every mile northward the city's heartbeat faded and the landscape grew more ambiguous. Regular crowds fell away, replaced by joggers wrapped in earbuds, and the shifting metallic echo of passing trains. Mike followed intricate directions sourced from Urban Explorer message boards, turn where the graffiti changes from swirling color to cryptic tags, duck through overgrown brush, listen for the distant sound of water trickling in old forgotten pipes. He did it all with a blend of excitement and seriousness, the rush of finding what others only dared to imagine. The final approach to the supposed entrance, a hidden hatch rumored to be buried near the cliffs, was marked by a sudden hush. Nature seemed to cling to secrecy even more tightly than the city. Mike hesitated but pressed on, referencing screenshots of blurry maps, and finally stopping by a patch of blackberry brambles. Some part of him must have felt the boundary, an unspoken sense of passing from day into shadow. He set his bike down carefully, checked the camera one last time, and pulled a headlamp from his pack. The cool hush in the air couldn't silence his anticipation. Inside the dim enclave beneath the bluffs, Mike was greeted by a world where city sounds were replaced with the drip of condensation, the scuff of sneakers against stone, the musty scent of earth untrodden for years. What he saw only he would ever know. Splashes of half-faded graffiti, relics of old urban engineering, rusted pipes, utility markings, melted candle stubs from previous wanderers. He narrated the surroundings softly, the GoPro's blinking light the only evidence of his presence in a maze designed to swallow time, light, and sound. Investigators later reconstructed these moments from the sparse clues left at the scene. Tire tracks, patched footprints, a half-crumpled energy bar wrapper whose barcode matched a nearby corner store. Records showed he spent nearly an hour exploring, perhaps crossing chamber after chamber, pausing to snap photos, scribbling notes, or simply savoring the solitude of a world between the living city and the unknown. What no one will ever truly grasp is the decision point, what drove Mike to continue deeper, or perhaps compelled him to ignore warning signs only visible in hindsight. Whether pure confidence, fascination, or a creeping sense that he was onto something extraordinary, he pressed on farther than any search team would later dare. His final movements remain the stuff of speculation. A passing runner later reported seeing a lone figure crouched by the edge of the cliff, as if debating the descent. Investigators combed through hours of surveillance footage, hoping for a glimpse, a flash of red jacket, a glint of bicycle handlebars. But the tunnel, gnawed at by time, silent and unlit, kept its secrets well. The city above pulsed on with life, all the while Mike's journey wound deeper into darkness. The days after would see exhaustive searches, drones dipping low along jagged rocks, sniffer dogs weaving through narrow openings, volunteers fanning out under pitiless sun and fog alike. They found impressions in the dirt, faint scuffs and broken twigs, but the trail always faded as if deliberately erased. When the police finally uncovered evidence, a torn scrap of map, the residue of a flashlight battery, relief mixed with dread. For his family, each hint of progress was a blade, hope and fear inseparable. As much as anyone tried, the heart of that final adventure, its sights, its discoveries, its silent revelations, remained Mike's alone. The footage, if ever captured, was never recovered. If answers were illuminated, they stayed buried with the echoes in that hidden world. Yet in the narration pieced together by loved ones, authorities, and all who dreamt of discovery, Mike's last adventure became more than the story of a vanished traveler. It embodied the irresistible pull of the unknown, the bravery and danger of chasing curiosity to its very end, and the bittersweet legacy left behind when a quest for truth and wonder meets the world's unyielding silence. Terrifying discovery at the rock face. The call came in just as the coastal fog began to lift over Santa Monica's famed bluffs. It was a Tuesday morning, and the front desk of the city's police department was already humming with the usual commotion. Minor disturbances, a few lost property reports, even a flurry of noise complaints about last night's beach parties. But the voice on the other end of this particular call was tight, clipped, and anonymous. The words spilled quickly. There was something unusual, something terrible, down by the base of the cliffs. A body, left exposed where the wild tangles of blackberry bushes met wind-scoured rock, out of sight from the walking trails above, but not from the determined eyes of someone who seemed to know where to look. Within minutes, patrol cars and an unmarked detective vehicle sped toward the bluffs. The location was one known for its dramatic beauty, volcanic rock dropping sharply to a narrow stony beach, scattered driftwood, and the insistent crash of Pacific tides. Paramedics too raced the clock, not because anyone thought they could help, but because even the hope for a miracle mustn't be disregarded. The morning chill carried with it a sinister stillness, as yellow tape was strung between shrubs and battered warning signs. Once the tide had receded enough to allow safe passage, the officers began their grim descent, evidence kits in hand, cameras around their necks, faces hardened from years of routine tragedies. The scene that awaited them was both surreal and viscerally disturbing. The body was partially obscured by a tangle of brambles, arranged almost as if someone had tried to hide it, and then given up, or simply left in a hurry. Flies buzzed in the halo of morning sunlight, but the skin, pale and stretched, showed none of the typical signs of animal predation that would usually follow several nights alone in the open. The officers held their breath, every sense sharpened by adrenaline and a creeping nausea that no amount of professional detachment could dispel. Detectives quickly established a perimeter, careful not to disturb the sand or accidentally trample any telltale evidence. The forensics team meticulously cataloged the area. Shoe prints, most faded but one or two crisp in the moist dirt, were photographed and later cast in plaster. A handful of broken branches, a stray shell casing that likely predated the scene, and a trail of half-flattened grass leading off towards the edge of the bluff. All these details were logged, tagged, and noted in soft, urgent voices. What struck them almost immediately was the condition of the remains. The corpse, later identified from dental records and DNA as that of Mike Manson, was alarmingly light. Veteran officers silently exchanged glances as the lead pathologist confirmed the near-total absence of major internal organs. There were incised wounds on the torso that bore a ghastly precision, the work of someone with at least rudimentary anatomical knowledge. But there was no blood pooled at the scene, no sign that a fatal altercation or butchery had occurred right there on the sand. It was as if the body had been moved after death, transported from another location, stripped of all but the most basic traces of identity. That sense of deliberate removal and delayed discovery haunted everyone at the site. The medical examiner's first assessments, conducted with gloved hands and whispered direction, left even the most hardened team members with a deep sense that this was not just an ordinary crime. Over the next hours, as technicians combed the ground for stray fibers and checked under boulders for discarded belongings, it became clear that something chillingly organized had unfolded. Mike's personal effects were nowhere in sight. No wallet, no phone, no travel journal, not even the GoPro he so loved. Each item's absence was another layer of frustration for the detectives. Suspecting the site to be a secondary dump location, police began canvassing the cliff tops for possible access routes. Rope marks, subtle indentations in the stubborn grass and scuffed rock suggested that whoever had brought the body here came prepared. Crime scene photographers worked methodically to capture every angle, the salty tang of sea air mixing with the metallic scent lingering around the remains. As word spread, the area drew its share of onlookers. Curious beachgoers and local reporters gathered at a respectful distance, craning their necks for a glimpse of the scene. Santa Monica's usual buzz was replaced by a quiet, anxious curiosity. For those who lived nearby, the sight of police tape fluttering in the breeze was both jarring and oddly mesmerizing, a grim punctuation mark against the city's postcard-perfect backdrop. Rumors immediately began swirling. Some believed the body to be connected to earlier disappearances, others theorized about organized crime or even occult rituals, their imaginations running wild in the absence of answers. By mid-afternoon, a coordinated recovery effort was underway. The remains were lifted with clinical care, placed in a sealed body bag, and transported up the bluff by stretcher, shielded from view by a screen of officers and tarps. Detectives questioned the individual who had made the anonymous call, but the details, though specific, were frustratingly scant. The caller had refused to give a name, claimed only to be a concerned hiker, and could not, or would not, say precisely how they had happened upon the location. Back at the county morgue, a full autopsy began. The coroner and her staff meticulously examined the body's external and internal state, searching for clues that might bridge the gap between theory and fact. Every incision, every abrasion, every patch of remaining tissue was studied, photographed, biopsied, and catalogued. Internal organs, missing entirely, told their own story. The cavities showed clean removal rather than ravaged decay. There was evidence of post-mortem manipulation, but no signs of what or who had performed such an act. Toxicology screens, scrapings beneath the fingernails, hair samples, and clothing fibers were documented, carefully packaged for later examination by specialists. Detectives worked late into the night, poring over old case files for any patterns or echoes that matched the chillingly surgical nature of Mike's death. They reached out to hospitals, flagged records for any surgeries or missing persons whose organs could be connected, and reviewed security footage from all pathways and access roads along the bluffs in the days preceding the discovery. Meanwhile, the news reverberated throughout the city and beyond. Headlines painted a picture of horror: body found at Bluffs, organs removed. Is Santa Monica harboring a serial predator? The Manson family, halfway across the world, was first notified through a tersely worded call from German police, followed only hours later by an official State Department communiqué. Their grief, shock, and numb denial played out parallel to the feverish search for answers unfolding in California. In the aftermath of the discovery, investigators gathered the evidence into a single, overwhelming file: patterns of disappearance, GPS and phone data, forensic analysis from the scene, even competing theories from law enforcement and civilian experts alike. Yet the most vital details remained elusive. Without a clear motive, identifiable perpetrator, or the crucial missing personal effects, the case teetered on the edge of becoming yet another coastal legend, swallowed by the tides of rumor and time. For Santa Monica, the discovery cast a long, somber shadow. Tourists wandered past police barriers, whispering about the darkness that sometimes hid behind the sun-dappled veneer of the city. Police, correspondents, and residents alike were left reckoning with the brutal mystery. Even in a place built on promise and escape, some stories ended in silence, told only by the wind, the sea, and the bluffs that watched over everything, haunting and unchanged. Family pain, and an unsolved mystery. The weeks following the grim discovery were an ever-deepening labyrinth for Mike's family, one from which light seemed forever banished. Despair, confusion, and a haunted kind of longing threaded through every hour. The news of the body's state, so depleted almost unrecognizable, sent shockwaves not only through his family but across their circle of friends, neighbors, and the extended community. With each passing day, the unanswered questions multiplied and grief became less of an event and more of a new, unwelcome reality they had to grow around. Mike's parents, Susan and Ben, vacillated between numb disbelief and raw anguish. Nothing in their previous experience could prepare them for a loss so strange, so saturated with horror and uncertainty. Simple acts, emptying a suitcase that would never be claimed, deleting a draft email addressed to Mike, became rituals of both remembrance and agony. In the living room, photos of a smiling son now seemed to belong to another lifetime. No new evidence surfaced, no policeman's knock restored hope, and worst of all, no one could give them a straightforward answer. Every interaction with authorities was fraught with tension and subdued frustration. Detectives would call, their tones always precise, careful not to promise what they couldn't deliver. Words like inconclusive, ongoing investigation, and pending results cycled endlessly. Forensics could not clarify how or why Mike's body had been so methodically emptied, and speculation from the media provided only more pain. Susan's dreams became plagued by images conjured up by newspaper headlines: organ trafficking, ritualistic crime, accidents too bizarre to imagine. Ben handled the onslaught by throwing himself into research, reading about other missing tourists, tracking forums discussing strange disappearances along the Pacific, comparing timelines and paths in ways that made sleep impossible. Susan, meanwhile, tried to preserve everyday routines for their younger son Daniel, all while battling powerful waves of guilt that pressed in at the quietest moments of the night. Was it something they missed? A warning ignored? A text message unanswered? Was there more they could have done to protect a child who, even as an adult, still seemed vulnerable? Family and friends tried to create a fortress of care around the grieving parents. Aunts, uncles, and close neighbors brought food, handled errands, and kept company during the hollow evenings when sorrow felt most overwhelming. Yet even in a house full of support, the silence loomed. Daniel quietly retreated into his room, headphones cocooning him from news reports he couldn't bear. He missed Mike's pranks, his loud laughter, his relentless optimism. He missed having an older brother to admire or argue with. The funeral service, held weeks after the conclusion of the forensics investigation, was both cathartic and deeply surreal. State officials and consular representatives attended, silent reminders that Mike's death was no ordinary tragedy. There were kind words from friends, tales of Mike's curiosity, kindness, and daring. But as the eulogies passed from person to person, a single theme persisted. How could someone so full of life be reduced to so many unknowable questions? His ashes were scattered at sea after a modest ceremony, granting the family a poignant, if incomplete, sense of closure. Still, they could not help but feel they had buried not only Mike, but any hope of truly understanding what had happened. In quiet moments, Susan sometimes found herself dialing Mike's number, if only to hear his voice on the old voicemail. The familiar ringtone, the pause before a recorded greeting, it was all she had left of those daily reassurances a mother takes for granted until they're gone. Messages poured in from Mike's friends and followers from around the globe. They sent stories, artwork, and photographs that captured his spirit, each artifact a reminder that he had touched lives far beyond their small family. As months wore on with no resolution, the mystery transformed into a space the family could never fully inhabit nor escape. Journalists occasionally called for follow-up interviews, but Susan rarely granted them. She bristled at speculation, even as she ached for closure. To talk about memory and pain in front of strangers felt like a betrayal to the complexity of the son she had raised. The unanswered nature of Mike's death threatened to calcify into a lifelong burden, a narrative others would dissect, mythologize, and repurpose, while those lowest to the ground simply missed the person at the heart of it all. Holidays were the hardest, as traditions lost meaning without Mike's presence. Dinner tables were set for 3, but always with a 4th plate lingering somewhere just out of sight, a symbol of all that was missing. Anniversaries of his birth and disappearance became silent, heavy landmarks in the family's collective calendar. And always in the back of each mind was the relentless need to know, why had this happened? Could it have been prevented? Was there a thread still left to pull, a detail to uncover, or a voice out there that might one day explain it all? Grief, in the end, settled into the grain of daily life, a constant companion, reshaping but never erasing the memory of a son, brother, and friend, taken far too soon, and under circumstances no one could believe or understand. The case became a cautionary tale in the community, a tremor of fear beneath every hopeful send-off of new travelers. And in the quiet spaces of their home, Mike's family continued the only kind of living possible after such a loss, bearing the weight of unanswered questions, carrying forward the love that can never be destroyed by any mystery, no matter how unyielding.